Hi there, my name's Katie Cibola. I'm a developmental psychologist from the University of Edinburgh, and I'm here to talk about our Sibling Data Cafes project. This was a project which focused on the sibling relationships of care experienced children and young people, and it aimed to create a dialogue between care experienced communities and the administrative data that's collected about care experienced young people's sibling relationships. Crucial to our project was the team. We worked from the very beginning, that application stage, as a team of academic researchers, care experience co-researchers, practitioners from organisations that support care experience young people, and a performance poet, of which more in a minute. Before I tell you about the cafes, I wanted to begin with a little bit of background. Sibling relationships can be really important for our well-being and our resilience. But children growing up in the care system are often separated from their brothers and sisters. Sometimes that's for reasons of safeguarding, but sometimes it's simply because a place can't be found for siblings to be together. And for siblings who are separated, there are sometimes limited opportunities to be in contact. And care experienced young people have expressed concerns about this. Now, there's lots of things we can do to support the sibling relationships of care experienced young people. Above all else, listening to young people and involving them in decision-making around their sibling relationships. We can provide training for carers about the importance of sibling relationships. We can make sure there's sufficient housing so that siblings are able to be kept together when it's safe to do so. And we can have legislation and policy around supporting care experienced sibling relationships. And as part of that, administrative data also helps. The Children Looked After Scotland, or CLASS data, is a national administrative data set. It contains de-identified data for all children who've been placed under the care of their local authority in Scotland. And it includes data on things like demographics, placement setting, so whether the children are in foster care or residential care, for example, and legal reasons for being in care. As a result of Scottish legislation and a commitment to the sibling relationships of care experienced young people, since 2024, local authority class returns are also required to include data on the number of siblings that a child has, how many they live with prior to placement, such as foster care, and how many they live with whilst in that placement. Now, class data is potentially very beneficial. It can help us understand the sibling separations and the consequences of separations for care experienced young people. It can help with national strategic planning and improvement for care experienced siblings, and it can enable the monitoring of progress nationally in how we support those sibling relationships. But we need to make the best of this data and use it well. And to do that, we need a rights-based approach to this administrative data. People need to know about the data that's collected about them. And data analysts also need to be fully aware of the lived experience that are represented by these data. So, how did we do that in our project? Well, really, our main aim was to create a dialogue between care experienced communities and the class administrative data, in order to impact positively on how these data are used to improve sibling relationships and outcomes for care experienced young people. We broke this down into three aims. First of all, we wanted to help care experienced people find out about and understand the new Children Looked After Scotland sibling data. We called that sibling data understanding. We also wanted to gather messages that people had about their lived experiences of care experienced sibling relationships and the stories behind the class sibling data, to help analysts really fully understand the class sibling data and be able to use it well and put it to good use. And we called that sibling data messages. And finally, we wanted to find out about people's priorities for future research that use the class sibling data. And we called that sibling data priorities. So, what did we do to meet these aims? We worked as a team to co-design 2 sibling data cafes. One was in person and one was online. There were lots of biscuits at the cafes. The cafes were for care experienced adults and their supporters, so foster carers and adoptive parents. And we were really mindful that discussing sibling relationships can be joyful, but potentially also emotionally very difficult. So we designed our cafes to be accessible, to be friendly, safe spaces where people could discuss sibling relationships. So for example, we had our trained mental health first aider at the cafes. We had a Being at the Cafes guide, which you can see there, which we gave to our cafe visitors to help them with their visit. We also had research ethics permission for our cafe work because we did gather data at the cafes too. So what did the cafes look like? Well, they were really similar. The in-person and the online cafes were very similar. And above all, these cafes were really a chance for people to come together, to have a cuppa, some biscuits, and a chat about sibling relationships, what was important to them about sibling relationships, and their views on the administrative data about care experienced children and their sibling relationships. So we did lots of that. There was lots of chatting at the cafe. We also designed a number of creative activities for our cafe visitors to do. And we designed this really as a journey from coming into the cafe and telling us about how they'd got to the cafe, creating some data in the process, to finding out about the Children Looked After Scotland data set, the sibling data that's collected as part of it and how it can be used, through sharing their sibling experiences and messages, the stories behind the administrative data to share with data analysts. We had activities that involved voting with ducks in duck ponds to tell us about their research priorities and how they would like the class sibling data to be used in order to positively impact on the lives of care experienced young siblings. And we also worked with our poet Craig, who helped us to design some prompts that we shared with the cafe visitors so they could tell us about some words and ideas that might be helpful in a poem. Okay, in terms of our project outcomes, we had lots of different project outcomes. I think the most important to us was that we found it was a useful event for our cafe visitors. So we collected feedback and it was really positive. Visitors felt they'd had an opportunity to learn about the Children Looked After Scotland sibling data. And they'd had a chance to share their sibling experiences and tell us about their own research priorities. And you can see a couple of quotes here from some of our cafe visitors. One said, "It's a lovely place. I was able to share what I find important about being and having a care experienced sibling." And another said, "Super helpful, important, and made me feel inspired for change." On the academic front, we submitted a journal article based on our analysis of cafe visitors' views on the class sibling administrative data and about their sibling stories and research priorities. We also shared information gathered at the cafe with the Scottish Government to help with the next developments of the class sibling data. But I think the most lovely outcome from the cafe is the poem written and performed by Craig Houston and woven from the stories that were shared at the cafe of sibling relationships. This poem now lives on the Research Data Scotland website on our project page, but it also appears next to the Children Looked After Scotland administrative data. So it will be seen by analysts as they go to access these data. And the poem really explores what our cafe visitors thought about the class sibling data, how they felt it should be used, and about those stories, those lived experiences of sibling relationships. A bonus outcome was that our project was a finalist at the 2026 Scottish Events Awards recently. In terms of our next steps, we've got some more articles based on the cafe methods and a briefing document planned. We're gathering feedback on the impact of the poem, and we've had some nice feedback already. And longer term, we're planning a research project that will actually use the class sibling data. And I hope as a result of this project, we'll use it well. Okay, I'd like to finish just with thanks most of all to our wonderful cafe visitors and the many, many organisations and individuals who helped us to advertise the cafes. I'd also like to thank organisations and folk who helped us with advice about Children Looked After Scotland data set and people who came to help us at the cafe. I'd like to obviously thank our funder, Research Data Scotland, who made this work possible, and just a little extra thanks to Tunnocks Biscuits, who very kindly donated biscuits for our cafe, and I think probably created a career highlight for me in getting to visit the factory to pick the biscuits up. I think a talk about cafes, probably finishing talking about biscuits, is the best place, so I'll finish up there.